I use my computer to write down all the goals I want to achieve this year. As you see, I made them clear and concise. I set myself an award for the end of the year that motivated me to achieve them. I decided that I would award myself for my accomplishments by not only giving myself pretend words that I created on the computer, but also throwing a pretend celebration at the end of the year. Kind of like an imaginary party, like a celebration. The more goals I achieved, the better the party would be. I got really excited. I knew imagining something like that would be a lot of fun, and this made me very excited about doing this. I planned on throwing a pretend dance party over at an abandoned building in Detroit. I decided that I would throw an imaginary party over at the abandoned train station in downtown Detroit. It's actually an abandoned building, it's vacant, and I was going to sneak in and throw a party if I achieve all these goals. That's the ultimate celebration. And that really excited me, so that gave me a lot of drive. I was already looking forward for the end of the year, and it was just beginning. I constructed and printed out a checkoff list to help me keep me on track. I was pumped to work on my goals. I started getting my hands on a lot of the books that my mom had by Joshua David Stone and learn more about what Joshua David Stone's spiritual concepts were. One of my favorite books that I read was called How to Release Fear-Based Thinking, The Ego. I went to Borders during the weekend and read some books that I found over there too, but I mostly read books by Joshua David Stone on how to spiritually grow. I worked on spiritually growing and trying to master being in what he called a God/loving/sufferless perspective as much as I could. I knew trying to learn how to be in a God/sufferless, spiritual/God, he a lot of times used all these different like slash marks to be specific about this perspective. He called it the Christ consciousness, positive consciousness, Buddha consciousness. It used all that as just meaning one concept, meaning like the God awakening to the truth perspective. And this really helped me, and I felt really pumped. I learned that in order to master being in a God-loving, sufferless perspective all the time, you need to learn to do that during situations that normally make you suffer. From the book, he called these situations spiritual tests. These spiritual tests basically were, examples of spiritual tests were someone being mean to you, having something that you like break, being in pain, being in a stressful situation, maybe losing someone you love, like having someone break up with you, or losing a job. I had a new girlfriend now at the beginning of this year. Her name was Jenny, and I really loved her a lot, and I was afraid that maybe she would break up with me. So I used that as a spiritual test to practice being in a God-loving, selfless perspective. If I were to encounter a spiritual test and remain in a peaceful, pleasurable, God-loving, selfless state, I then passed a lesson. In order to completely let go of suffering and spiritually grow and find inner peace, you have to get to a point of mastery where you can pass pretty much any lesson you can imagine without even the slightest bit of feeling of suffering. One challenge already at the beginning of this year, 2003, challenges already started. I was faced with many tests already. One challenge that happened this year was I found it to be quite tough with being peaceful, with not being upset about my girlfriend. She did something that made me really upset. I constantly wanted to see Jenny, but I rarely ever saw her. I really liked her a lot, but it seemed like whenever I tried to call her, she always seemed to make excuses not to talk to me and hang out. I only hung out with her a couple of times. Whenever we made plans to go on a date, she would often tell me in the last minute that she couldn't go. I would feel very disappointed. I found that not having my license yet and not being able to drive only made things harder. My parents didn't want me to drive yet because they felt like because of my disability I probably wouldn't be good to drive a car yet. I really wanted to drive. Even though I never had a chance to see her, and that my suspicions grew about if she really liked me or not, I still felt very happy to be her girlfriend. Every day, I would think about how lucky I was to have her as a girlfriend, and I often looked at a picture of her. One thing that really made me happy about having her as a girlfriend is that I finally got to see what it was like to make out with someone. All my years in high school, since freshman up to this point as a junior, I finally got to French kiss a girl for the second time, and I really liked it. And not only that, I had a chance to actually make out with her for a while, and I was so happy about that, and I did enjoy it. In spite of all that, in spite of being happy about being with her, things did take a turn. One day after Valentine's Day, I instant messaged one of her best friends. Her name was Kim. We talked for a while, and then she told me something that concerned me. She told me that she's been cheating on me. She told me she had sex with another guy during Valentine's Day. I didn't believe her at first. I told her, hey, back off, man. She's my girl. Don't be telling her, talking, stuff about her. But then I decided that, maybe it is true. I decided to try to call Jenny, but as usual, she didn't answer. Her dad answered the phone instead. I asked him where she was at, and she said she was hanging out with some guy. Suddenly, out of the blue, I found myself asking her dad if she hangs out with a lot of guys, and he says yes, she does hang out with a lot of guys. That's when I realized, you know what, she definitely has been cheating on me. I was really bummed out. I decided to write her an email. I stated that I didn't want to be in a relationship anymore. I wanted to yell at her and tell her how upset I was, because I was kind of upset, and what happened was I felt like something that would make anybody upset. But then I realized, ooh, this is a spiritual test. So I was determined to be in a positive Christ consciousness, and I thought, this might be an opportunity to spiritually grow and not spread hate, because I was so determined to spiritually grow. So instead I emailed her and told her instead I decided to just email her and break up with her without yelling at her and telling her she's a horrible person or anything. Instead I just kind of just stated what I found out, and then I told her in the email in a nice way that I'm breaking up with her. I tried really hard to not make it sound negative. The next morning, I checked my email and she wrote me back. I read it and it said, "You know what?" And it said this. You know what? My dad told me you're weird as fuck, and my grandmother also. So get a life. I have a boyfriend not as weird as you. And she made it look like that. I been had a boyfriend for the longest time. You're just too nerdy for me. You're into electronics and shit, and that's not my type of boyfriend. So, you think you get all the girls, lame-o. I think you're so wrong. I actually thought you were gay when I first saw you. Laugh out loud. Well, I'm out. After I saw that, I was like kind of shocked. I was like, wow. I never heard her talk like that before. Most of the time when I emailed her, like, she just kind of was like, yeah, things are going good, blah, 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 and it kind of kept it short. But damn, I would like never, ever, even for the slightest clue, thought she would say something like that and sound so negative and hateful. Like, I was kind of like, I didn't really know what to think for a second. Not to mention, I was sad that, the relationship was over. After reading, I was proud of myself, however, not to be upset about the breakup. I tried really hard to not be upset, and I did good for a while. However, after a couple weeks, I suddenly found myself having trouble holding up on the positive perspective and not being mad at her. Anger started eventually creeping in. I started feeling angry at her, especially towards the end of the year. It was like a year later, finally it started really getting upset. It was weird. This added to my this made me feel a little bit discouraged about my spiritual awakening process. In spite of my realization about her, I still did miss being in a relationship with her. I miss thinking that she was. I miss thinking that she was better than I miss thinking that I miss being under the illusion of thinking that she was better than who she really was, and I miss feeling good about myself because of it. That made me realize that breakups can be hard, not because of letting go of the actual person is hard, but because letting go of the person you thought there were is thought the person was is. In spite of what she did, I didn't let what she said discourage my social skills and the ability to find another girlfriend.